Welcome back for another deep dive. You know we love to go deep on a specific topic and really unpack it. Today we're diving into the world of hypnosis.
Oh, yeah.
But not like,
Sexy stuff.
yeah, not like swinging watches or anything like that. We're actually looking at a guide for hypnotists that focuses on ethical communication,
Right.
and especially the claims that they can and cannot make.
Especially in a non-medical setting.
Exactly.
It's a fascinating area.
Yeah.
There's so many gray areas.
Yeah,
Where do you draw the line between what a hypnotist can say and what they can't say?
exactly.
Especially when you're talking about things like medical claims or medical conditions.
Right. And so this guide we have really digs deep into the language
Right.
that a hypnotist can and cannot use. Like, are you ready for this?
Yeah.
There are specific words that hypnotists should avoid altogether,
Oh, yeah.
especially if they're not also a licensed medical doctor.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest distinctions this guide emphasizes is the difference between describing hypnosis as complementary versus alternative.
So break that down for me a little bit, and for our listener, of course. What's the difference and why does it even matter?
Right. So complementary means that hypnosis can work alongside traditional medical treatments,
Okay.
but not in place of them.
Yeah.
So it's about using different approaches together for a
Nice.
more well-rounded approach to well-being.
Gotcha.
But alternative suggests that you're replacing conventional treatment,
Oh, I see.
which can be misleading and potentially harmful.
Okay, so a hypnotist could help someone manage stress associated with, let's say, a chronic illness,
Right.
but they couldn't claim to actually cure the illness itself.
Exactly.
Gotcha. So it's about managing expectations and being transparent about what hypnosis can and cannot do.
Absolutely.
I feel like this is probably especially important these days on social media.
Oh, it's crucial because that's where a lot of these misleading claims
Right.
unfortunately take place.
Yeah, you can just make any claim you want on social media.
Exactly. So it's important for hypnotists to be very careful about what they say online.
Yeah, and I think that's another area that this guide really digs into is
provide.
specific language
Yeah.
that hypnotists can use.
Mm-hmm.
And it even includes like a sample disclaimer for hypnotists to use on their website and social media profiles.
Right.
And what does that disclaimer say, basically?
It basically encourages people to seek advice from a medical doctor if they have any health concerns.
Oh, okay. So it's just being upfront, like, hey, I'm a hypnotist. I can help you with these things.
Right.
But if you have an actual medical condition, you need to talk to an actual doctor.
Exactly. It's about protecting both the hypnotist and the client.
Right. But I feel like this guide goes deeper than that.
Oh, it goes much deeper.
Because it's not just about avoiding medical claims. It's about like the nuances of the language.
The subtle nuances.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, like you can say this, but you can't say this other thing.
Exactly. And it gives specific examples of permissible versus prohibited phrasing.
Right.
And it really is like walking a tightrope sometimes. You can say hypnosis for stress management and well-being,
Okay.
but hypnosis cures chronic pain is a big no-no.
Wait, so even if a hypnotist has seen positive results
Right.
with their clients experiencing chronic pain, they can't mention that at all.
Right.
Why such a hard line?
It comes down to evidence and protecting people.
Yeah.
If you're making a claim like that, you need solid scientific backing to support it.
Oh.
And without that, you're venturing into dangerous territory because you could be giving people false hope
Right.
and potentially preventing them from seeking proper medical care.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It also, I guess, creates this blurry line between what's considered medical treatment and what's not,
Exactly.
which can be very murky waters.
It can, and that can have legal ramifications
Right.
for hypnotists who aren't also licensed medical professionals.
So, wow, it's a lot more to think about than I initially realized, because it's not just about like being truthful. It's about understanding the impact
Oh, right.
of your words.
The potential impact.
Right.
And taking responsibility for that.
Yeah, and that responsibility, I think, can get even trickier when we start to think about the differences between medical doctors who use hypnosis
Right.
and hypnotists who don't have a medical background.
Yeah, that's a whole other layer of complexity, isn't it?
So if a licensed doctor incorporates hypnosis into their practice, do the same rules still apply to them?
Well, doctors have more leeway because they're operating within the medical field, but they're still bound by medical regulations and ethical codes,
Oh, okay.
especially when it comes to making claims about cures. Patient safety and responsible practice are always the top priorities.
Right.
So even a doctor couldn't just say hypnosis will cure your insomnia.
Right.
It would be more about how hypnosis can help you manage the stress that might be contributing to your sleep difficulties.
So it's really about being accurate and responsible with what hypnosis as a therapeutic tool can realistically achieve.
Absolutely.
Okay, but what happens when a hypnotist encounters a client who maybe needs more than just stress management? What if someone comes in and they're really struggling with something like severe anxiety or depression or addiction? What does this guide say about those kinds of situations?
Yeah, that's where things can get a bit more,
Yeah, a little more ethically tricky.
yeah, tricky for sure. Well, that's where referring clients to other professionals comes in.
Yeah.
This guide really emphasizes how important it is for a hypnotist
Yeah.
to think of the client's best interest
Mm-hmm.
and to refer them to someone else if they need more help.
Oh, okay. So even if it means they might lose that client,
Yeah,
they should recommend seeing a doctor or a therapist.
exactly.
Yeah.
If that's what's best for the client.
Okay. So.
Hypnotists need to recognize the limits of what they can do
Mm-hmm.
and understand that working with other healthcare professionals
Yeah.
is really the best way to take care of someone.
Yeah.
A hypnotist can still work with the client,
Yeah.
help them with emotional distress related to what's going on,
Okay.
but they should never try to replace medical or psychological treatment.
Right. It really makes you think about all the trust involved
Oh, absolutely.
between a hypnotist and a client,
Mm-hmm.
because the client is usually coming to them for help with sensitive issues.
Right, you're looking for guidance.
Right.
They're vulnerable.
Exactly. So clear and ethical communication is super important.
It's crucial.
Okay, so this guide goes even further than that.
Oh, yeah. It's full of advice.
Okay.
It's like a cheat sheet for ethical communication.
Like specific language recommendations.
It even has a table
Oh, wow.
that compares words and phrases hypnotists should avoid
Okay.
with words and phrases they should use instead.
Can you give us some examples? What kind of words are off limits?
Okay, so one of the big ones is guérir.
Okay, and remind me what that means in English.
That's the French word for cure.
Oh, okay.
And the guide strongly advises against using that word.
Like at all.
Yeah, they suggest saying offre un soutien instead,
And that means?
which means offer support.
Okay, so it's shifting away from promising a specific outcome and focusing more on providing guidance.
Right, it's about facilitating the client's own process of change.
Okay, what other words are on that avoid list?
Let's see. Traitement is another interesting one.
And that means?
That's French for treatment,
Okay.
and the guide recommends replacing that with phrases like peut aider à,
Okay.
which means can help with.
So instead of saying, I can treat your insomnia,
Right,
they might say, hypnosis can help you develop healthier sleep habits.
exactly.
It's fascinating how just changing a couple words can make a big difference
It really does.
in how people perceive hypnosis.
It shapes their expectations.
Yeah, it's like learning a whole new language.
It is.
But the rules are about ethical considerations.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've been talking about language
Yes.
and how it can be used in misleading ways.
Right.
And how hypnotists really need to be careful about their words.
It's about recognizing that words have weight, especially when you're dealing with people who are looking for help.
And I imagine this becomes even more delicate when you're talking about things like anxiety, depression, ADHD, eating disorders.
Right.
What does the guide say about those situations?
The guide says to be super cautious when talking about those kinds of conditions, especially online or in marketing,
Why?
because hypnotists who aren't also medical doctors aren't qualified to diagnose or treat them.
So even if a hypnotist thinks hypnosis could help someone with anxiety,
Yeah,
they can't say that it's a treatment for anxiety.
exactly.
Gotcha. Instead, they should just focus on the emotional and behavioral parts of these conditions
Right.
without implying that they're some kind of expert. So
No.
for example,
Yeah.
instead of saying hypnosis can cure your depression,
Right.
they might say something like hypnosis can help you manage the stress and negative thoughts that often come with depression. So they're staying in their lane
Right.
and not trying to act like a doctor.
It's about making it clear that hypnosis can support someone, but it's not a replacement for professional help.
So this guide is all about France
It is.
because it was originally written in French.
Right.
How relevant is all this to hypnotists in other parts of the world?
That's a good question.
Yeah, because different countries have different rules.
They do.
So how much of this actually applies outside of France?
Well, specific regulations might be different from country to country,
Okay.
but the ethical principles are universal.
So even if the legal details are different in the US or Canada,
Right.
the core values of honesty and transparency and responsible communication are still the same.
Absolutely.
And it's really what this guide is all about.
It is.
It's interesting because the guide even mentions the FTC,
It does.
which is the Federal Trade Commission in the US,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's a French document.
Right. They're acknowledging that these principles matter everywhere.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, hey, these ethical guidelines aren't just for France, they're for everyone. It's
Exactly.
about consumer protection. Making sure hypnosis is practiced ethically everywhere.
Absolutely.
So it's like we're seeing the beginning of a global standard
It seems like.
for ethical communication in hypnosis,
Yeah.
which is really cool. But that also means hypnotists have a lot of responsibility.
Yep. They do?
They can't just rely on one set of rules.
Right.
They have to be proactive and stay informed.
Exactly. Ethical practice isn't about following a checklist.
Mhm.
It's about having integrity and compassion
Yeah.
and a deep respect for how powerful hypnosis can be.
It's about understanding that your words have consequences
Absolutely.
for your clients and for the whole field of hypnosis.
It's about using your words carefully
Yeah.
and being mindful of the impact you have on others.
Wow, we've really gone deep on this topic.
We have.
It's amazing how much there is to consider.
I know it seems like a simple topic.
Yeah.
The language of hypnosis.
But it's actually quite complex.
It is.
And nuanced.
That's why it's so fascinating.
Right, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Exactly.
There's always something new to discover.
There is.
Yeah.
It really is. And this guy does a great job of laying out all the challenges that come with talking about these sensitive topics, physical and psychological conditions,
Yeah.
without crossing those ethical lines.
And it gives a ton of practical advice, too,
It does.
about wording and really understanding where hypnosis ends and medical practice begins.
Exactly. It emphasizes the importance of using careful language
Yeah.
and avoiding any medical jargon or statements that could be misconstrued as a diagnosis.
Okay, so what are some examples? How do hypnotists navigate that gray area?
Well, for instance,
Yeah.
instead of saying something like, I can treat your fibromyalgia,
Okay.
a more responsible way to phrase it would be something like,
Okay.
I can help you manage the stress and discomfort associated with chronic pain.
Right. So you're acknowledging the client's experience. You're
Yes.
offering support,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not making any promises you can't keep.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for hypnotists to have a strong ethical foundation
Yeah.
and a commitment to ongoing education, because our understanding of these issues
Right.
is constantly evolving.
Yeah. Are there any specific words or phrases that hypnotists should avoid when discussing these conditions? Like any that might surprise people.
Definitely. For instance, the guide advises against using words like guérison and
Definitely.
which is French for healing.
So even if a hypnotist believes they are helping a client heal emotionally or mentally, they shouldn't use that word.
It's best to avoid it
Interesting.
because healing can be interpreted as a medical process,
Oh, I see.
which isn't what non-medical hypnosis is about.
So instead of saying healing, they might say something like supporting your emotional well-being
Exactly.
or helping you find a greater sense of balance.
It's about choosing your words very carefully.
Wow. It's incredible how much nuance there is to the language of hypnosis.
There really is.
Every word choice seems to matter.
It does, and that's why this guide is so helpful.
Yeah.
Because it gives us a framework for thinking critically about how we use language and how that language affects others.
It's about recognizing that our words have power,
They do.
and we need to use that power responsibly.
Absolutely. And that responsibility doesn't just fall on individual hypnotists.
Right. It's not just a personal thing.
It's a collective effort.
Okay, so what do you mean by that?
I mean, the whole hypnosis community
Yeah.
needs to come together to uphold high standards and hold each other accountable
So how do we do that?
by having these open and honest conversations
Yeah.
about these ethical issues.
Challenging each other.
Exactly.
To do better.
And always striving to learn and grow as a profession.
So we need to create a culture of ethics within the field of hypnosis,
I think that's a great way to put it.
where everyone feels safe to speak up and share their concerns.
Exactly.
Wow, this deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening.
It has been fascinating, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing how something as seemingly simple as language can have such profound ethical implications.
It's a reminder that ethical practice is a journey.
It's not a destination.
Exactly.
We're always learning
Always striving to be more mindful.
and to use our words for good.
Absolutely.
So we've been talking a lot about how this guide focuses on France,
Yeah.
but it also mentioned the FTC in the United States,
It did.
which is really interesting to me.
I think it's a sign
Of what?
that the need for ethical standards in hypnosis is global.
Yeah, like these principles are universal.
Exactly.
The FTC has really strict guidelines about advertising
They do.
and consumer protection.
It's about protecting people
Yeah,
from false claims.
exactly. And I think that's something that needs to be a priority in the field of hypnosis as well.
Absolutely. It's about building trust and ensuring that hypnosis is used ethically and responsibly everywhere.
Well, this conversation has definitely given me a lot to think about,
Don't you
and
think?
I hope it's done the same for our listeners.
I hope so.
It's been a fascinating journey into the world of hypnosis.
It has. It's ethical communication.
A reminder that words have power and we need to use them wisely.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So until next time, keep diving deep, stay curious, and remember that ethical practice is an ongoing process.
Absolutely.
We're all in this together.